We'd like to welcome Charlie Scott, a longtime basketball official, to the Joe Show tonight. Charlie's been officiating for over 40 years, and throughout this show that we've done, we've interviewed coaches, Charlie, and kind of had coaches kind of tell about their background and their coaching journey. So thought it'd be interesting to bring an official on. So my first question for you is, how'd you get started in officiating, and kind of what's that journey been like?
Well, it's been a great journey for one thing. I enjoy being around the kids. It's still fun. A friend of mine, I just got married in February, and that fall he said, "Hey, let's take the officiating class." So we took the officiating class, and Russ Pitts was our.
Good old Russ.
Yeah, Russ. They had so many people in the officiating class. There was, I think, 30 in each class, and Jerry Zernewski, who's the local official, and now as of 2 years ago, Dale Pennington he's up around Tiffin. He and I were the only two left, but we ended up, Sertel taught one class and Russ taught the other, and we ended up in Russ's class. And he, I don't know, I must have did something right, because he took me as his JV official. Back then you took your JV officials, and him and Bobby Reel took myself and a guy by the name of Ralph Chabert at that time. We went with them everywhere and did all their JV games, and it led
which is a lot different than it is today.
Oh yes,
I mean
yes.
that's one of the things you brought it up, and was probably going to bring that up later, but I think talk about it now. But I don't think people realize, like when I started coaching, that the varsity officials and JV officials came at the same time, and then JV officials stayed and watched the varsity officials. And now
that's
today,
huge, yes.
JV officials leave as soon as the game's over.
Yeah, they're going, and we learned a lot just watching them. And but I mean, it was a whole night thing, but also the varsity officials had to stay for the JV, so they could give you some pointers. And my partner and I try to show up for all the JV game, and you don't flood a JV official with a bunch of stuff. You give him one or two things, and I mean, he can let it go in one ear and out the other, or he can take it, whatever he wants, and makes it kind of nice sometimes, So then, very seldom, I think you could count on one hand how many times a year they stick around.
So when you got into officiating, you started officiating like at the JV level.
Correct.
So like, how long did you stay like a JV official till you started advancing to a varsity official?
Yeah, it was, you have to do JV ball 7th and 8th, 9th grade for 2 years. The third year, you can get into varsity officiating, as long as you pass your test to be a one. And so I was fortunate just because they got a lot of games, and I got handed some games that I probably didn't deserve to have at the varsity level, because they couldn't do all the games people asked them for. So started the third year and was able to do some games, and then just kept going from there. So as and people again may not understand that now, since you have 3-man crews, but back then it was just 2. Correct.
So did you, at that time, did you kind of keep a partner, or did you work with a variety of people?
Yeah, when we were going with Russ and Bobby, we had a usual partner. Once in a while you'd have somebody different, but very seldom, because they would call. And we had a lady that did our books, and they just called her, and she wrote it in our calendar. And I mean, it was pretty nice. I think back then we paid her $100, and we didn't do anything but wait on our book. She handed us our book before the season started. It was pretty nice. And so, we just looked, and they would call her, and that's how I got some games, because, she'd say, well, Russ and Bobby can't do it. I have a young official. Would you be interested in him? So.
My next question, we're getting to the end of the regular season. We're getting into tournament, and I think you officiated for 40 years, and last year you got a chance to do, I think, a state tournament game at the girls' state tournament.
Right.
Correct. So I guess maybe one of the interesting things for people that are watching would be kind of how does that process work? About you eventually, I mean, it took you 40 years to get there. about that process of getting sectional games, district games, regional games, and finally state tournament games.
Early in our career, it was just the coaches.
Right.
We got votes, and it just went on who the coaches, and then eventually, it was you got a vote from the athletic director.
Yep.
You got the coach. I think the principal was involved at one time. I'm not sure.
I'm not sure if they are either, but then I think the league commissioners were.
Yeah, and then you had you get votes from the secretary, your association, the secretary of the association, the interpreters, and then your association, and then I think they're called Friends of the OHSAA. They have so many votes.
Oh, I don't know. I didn't know about that.
Yeah, they can vote. I think it's like maybe people that go out and observe. I'm not sure. Maybe assigners. I'm not sure exactly who friends of that are, but I think it's people that are involved that have a lot to do, that puts a lot of time into the officiating end of it. So
like my understanding now is it's not like officials are ranked 1 through whatever. They're just like you have a top group of officials that are put into a pool, and then those kind of pools carry like district to regional.
Yeah,
and then eventually to state.
Correct, exactly. Yeah, we you get ranked and you get so many points, and usually I think 60 is the top rating, and I've never heard of anybody getting a 60, but maybe they have, and so usually, if you're in the 50s, you're probably going to get a state game. If you're in the 40s, you're going to get a regional game. If you're in the 30s, you'll get a district game, and 20s, you get a sectional game.
So when you sometimes get to the tournament, are you now like, are you put with like 2 other guys that you have no clue who they are?
Yeah, you're potluck on that, and you get you kind of get settled in with your usual partners, and it's kind of nice I think it's kind of nice at the tournament level. Now all of a sudden you got to pick your game up a little bit, because now you're officiating with good people, and you're thinking, well, I don't want not get showed up, but I don't want them to look a lot better than me. So yeah, I think it helps sometimes.
So during the season, do you have a crew that you pretty much work with?
Correct. Yes.
You like that better than if you were just assigned kind of randomly?
I kind of like it for the most part, but once in a while it's nice just to officiate with
Somebody else.
excuse me, somebody else that you don't know, because you have a good pregame and you get into some stuff, and
I know that was a discussion probably 10 years ago that we had, like, did we want crews or the so-called best officials? And I think a lot of coaches, at least I was the one that was favored, I preferred a crew because of what you just said, the comfort zone that they had like during the regular season, that like, because sometimes I found that if you had 3 separate guys, you might have one guy that was going to try to show everybody else up. And I've had guys that come to me and go, I could tell you remember Merle Dutt, don't you?
Yeah.
So we had Merle Dutt, Rick Bayless, and I can't think of who the third guy was, but their normal third guy wasn't there. And so we were playing, I believe, Riverdale, and I had a kid named Jake Mahosky came from behind and blocked it, kind of pinned it on the glass, and the official called a goaltend. So I was going, I was calm. I was going kind of berserk a little bit, and Rick Bayless, next was a free throw, and Rick stayed in front of me, and I'm going, Rick, there's no way that's a goaltend. And Rick's just kind of like, la la. And so then another foul happens. Well, Merle's in front of me, and I'm still going. Merle was just tall. And I still remember Merle had that whistle in his mouth. He takes the whistle in his mouth, and he turned and he goes, "It was tonight, Joe." And I was like, well, just shut up and move on. So you kind of referred a little bit also to, what you try to do. But like right now, you've been officiating pretty much since November. So like when you go to a game, like maybe give people like a typical game night scenario of when you get there and kind of what you go through.
Right. You usually check before you go. You check on official or teams' records and see, common opponents, if they've already played each other, what kind of game we're possibly going to have. And once you get there, you go to the locker room. We watch the first half of the JV game, and shortly into the third quarter, we go start getting dressed. Well, while you're getting dressed, you have what we call pregame. We go. I have a sheet I use that you go over all the things that you're going to do during the game and try to get everybody on the same page, because sometimes at the high school level, you got somebody calling every little touch, and you have other officials that are letting them play a little bit. So you try to get on the same page, so you're going to match calls and things like that. And so while you're getting dressed, you get a little camaraderie with the guys, and you know you're the only three. Trying to show somebody up is stupid, because you're the only three guys out there that you can get along with. You know, everybody else has a dog in the fight, and we don't. And so then once we go out on the floor, it's, you know, you're watching, see which team's athletic, which team's tall, which team's, you know, can shoot the three. It doesn't always work that way, but you kind of watch that. And then once we pitch it, you know, you kind of tune out that there is a crowd there, or whatever. And I mean, we talk about what happens, you know, how to deal with coaches and stuff in our pregame, the tables, you know, players, everything like that. So.
That's kind of interesting, because it's almost like a scouting report that,
Yes, exactly.
that coaches do.
Right.
So the other part, though, is like right now, I mean, how many games do you typically do a week?
I do. It used to be, you know, you only work Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Now they're so short on officials, they've moved things. You could have a game Monday or Wednesday also. And I would say throughout the year, probably average 5 a week. You know, sometimes you double dip on Saturdays because you have an afternoon game, but then you have time to recoup and have the evening game. So, yeah, I would say 5 at least.
You know, one of the other thing is, I guess you talked a little bit about, you talked about, you know, players or teams, and also coaches. So maybe talk a little bit about that coach official relationship, how you kind of deal with that.
Yeah. And I mean, we talk because, I mean, you know, coaches, and you say, yeah, in there you're going to say, hey, this coach could be a handful. This coach isn't going to say a word. You know, I have a special relationship with this coach, so if you get in trouble, I'll come over and I'll try. I may not be able to please him, but maybe he'll listen to me a little better. Or if you have a special relationship with one of the two, then you go ahead and handle him. You know, if he gets upset. So we get into that a little bit, but for the most part, I've always went with the idea that I'm there for 2 hours. The coach is there all week, so he's going to take a lot more abuse than I'm going to take in that 2 hours. So, you know, I mean, at the end of my pregame, I always say, hey, you got to, you answer questions, you ignore statements, and you penalize insanity. So unless that coach is insane, then and I tell some of the younger officials, you know, if you go back to the locker room and you think, man, I should have stuck that kid, or I should have stuck that coach, you should have probably.
Yeah.
You know, you're doubting yourself, you know. But I mean, it just doesn't work that way. I know I didn't. I think I didn't give a technical for, I don't even know how many years, 4 or 5 years anyway. And
I mean, I've always appreciated officials, and I mean, you know, there's been times that you know I know I should get a technical foul, but I've also appreciated when officials have just said, that's it. You know, that you know, when they've come and go, and then, you know, if you step over the line again, then you know, you deserve it. I go to some games that my son coaches at JV at Kilbourne, and so I've watched some of their games. And one night, an official, I think they gave two player technicals, basically for like kind of like taunting a kid. And I saw this young official. I thought he did a really good job with the first one. Like, he teed him up, and then it was like in the next dead ball, he went to the kid and kind of just like talked to the kid like, hey, you know, like he wasn't going to hold it over him. And then the other one that happened in the game, the coach was kind of, you know, getting on the official, and finally the official kind of turned and he goes, hey, he said, I'll talk to you, call a timeout. He said, but I'm not going to stand here and listen to you yell at me. And I thought, you know, that was pretty good.
Yes.
So you know, you've been a basketball official for 40 years, so basketball's changed a lot. So what maybe have you seen the positive changes in basketball over those 40 years?
I would say, to me, the biggest change is girls basketball. Used to be they stood on their tippy toes and rebounded, and you had, you know, back then you had a jump ball every time there was a jump ball instead of the alternating possession. And it seemed like you had to ice your shoulder afterwards for pitching. But now they're athletic, you know. we had a girl down at the state last year, and I thought she could have played at the boys' state level. She was that good. I mean, you're just seeing girls that are athletic as all get out, and they're fun to watch. And, you still have small schools that don't have the athletes, but everybody's got an athlete or two.
I mean, I think the skill level of girls basketball is going up, and I think,
Yeah.
with kind of what's happened with college, with Caitlin Clark,
Right.
that continues to elevate that kind of
Oh,
play.
I think, yeah.
I mean, the only concern I think with girls basketball right now we have kind of in the state of Ohio is just the numbers aren't there a lot. I mean, that's what's kind of disappointing is that. I mean, I think there's, like you said, the skill level is going up, but it seems like I have a lot of teams that don't have JV teams anymore.
Yes.
And that's hurt it.
Yep.
Flip the coin. You've been in it 40 years. What's the negative things that you've seen?
I think kids watch TV, and they see what the pros are doing, and they think that's at our level, and it's not. So I think kids aren't as respectful as they used to be. I don't know why, but you see a lot of kids that there's more technicals given to kids now, I think, than there ever has been, because they think they're allowed to act a certain way because they watch, TNT and the NBA's on there, ESPN, and they see how those guys act and nobody does anything. But, I mean, I think some of that disrespect, which leads to the fans are awful now. It used to be, you can tell when someone's being vicious first when they're just yelling at you, and I think the viciousness, is awful now with some fans.
Yeah, and I think the OHSA is trying to do some programs about fan behavior and stuff, but that's a hard one to deal with. I mean,
Yes.
I think we talked maybe a little bit before about you said you hardly ever eject fans, and now that's become more of a commonplace that has happened in the game, which is which is sad. I mean, the thing that I think you said, it seems too that, like, when the kids make a three now, they gotta do something. They gotta do they all have to do something.
Right.
And I'm a little bit old school that I don't know if I could deal with that either. It was funny. Was talking to a former coach, and we were talking about one of his former players is a college coach now, and so he said, he'll see him like in the locker room, they're dancing and stuff, and he goes, Joe, man, I could never do that. So you not only officiate at the high school level, but you've also officiated at the college level. So you've done D3, and I believe you said D2, correct?
Correct.
So the shot clock is in college basketball, and I know one of the issues that we have in high school basketball is there's people that want the shot clock, and then I have people telling me, Joe, don't ever, being involved with the coach association, you guys better never put up that we want a shot clock. So, being an official, how would you feel about the shot clock coming into high school?
I like it at the college level. It's fine, but I think I'm not sure the high school level, not so much because of play, which we don't care. We're worried about the shot clock operator, and it is harder to operate a shot clock than it is the game clock. And I don't think schools realize that it's got to be somebody that is dead on. And I'm not sure, unless officials work at it pretty hard, that when it should be reset, when it should not be reset, when you go to a partial reset. It's going to be tough if they go to it to find people at every school that have the knowledge.
Because I've said this, it's not like running the regular clock or running the scoreboard. No, it's completely different, and adds another element of. I mean, then there's another element of could be discrepancy of how the game. I've talked to some coaches, and I've had like coaches like Jim Ruckey, who's at Findlay. I heard him on a podcast. They asked him about it. He goes, well, we played, I think he said they played Toledo St. John's last year, and the score was like 40-38. And he goes, and I watched that game, and he goes, I timed every one of our possessions, and I timed every one of St. John's. He said our possession was like 17.1 seconds on an average. Oh. St. John's was like 20.2. So he said, shot clock's really not going to affect that. And then I got a nephew that coaches at Pettysville, small school, but he's got a player that's playing at Ohio Northern, and he said his player's a freshman. He came back and he said, Coach, he goes, I love the shot clock, and I said, really, Brian? He goes, yeah. He goes, but he didn't love it. He goes, he loved it because he said at the defensive end of the floor, he said you knew you had to play whatever it is for 30 seconds.
Right.
And that was it. You didn't have to, reset and play, for a minute. So that was interesting.
Well, Coach Quackenbush at
Yep.
Newark, you know him
Yep.
well, and when Trevor was coaching at Newark, I was down watching, and he goes, Scotty, come here. So I went over and he told me, he says, you're not going to believe what happened Friday night. He said, one of the officials, somebody was wearing him out, and him being the athletic director and the coach, he had somebody that took care of it. And he said, I see him come across the floor at me, and he said, there was a little over a minute left in the game, and they came over, and he said, I know you're pitching someone, just get rid of him. They said, yeah, the guy on the clock. And he said, I had to find someone to do the clock. You can find someone to do the book. But he said, I had to find someone in the crowd to do that clock that knew what they were doing for that. And he said it was a close, tight game. So it tells you that clock person's pretty important. And he said he couldn't find anyone for the longest time. He said it probably took 3 minutes to find somebody. So.
One of the things, we've said you've officiated for 40 years. Young people getting into officiating, what would be kind of your sales pitch of why they should do it?
Well, I think especially at the college level, it's a nice part-time job. It's hard to get kids because of the abuse they take. It's a different mindset when I was young versus when they were young. Not sure either one's right or wrong, but they say, hey, instead of this $45 I'm getting paid or $50 or whatever for a JV game, I can sit at home and not take that abuse. Yep. And I think it's, whether it's money you have to raise, the what they get paid for a game.
Well, that's changed a lot though too, because when you probably first started fishing, like scrimmages,
yeah,
you didn't get paid.
No.
Nobody paid. It was like that was like a training thing.
Exactly. That was our preseason.
And I ran into that towards the end of my coaching career. I mean, we were paying like, I think I was up to like $50 for a scrimmage, and I was having a hard time getting officials, and then finding one of the officials here in Mansfield goes, well, Joe, nobody wants to do it because you don't pay. I said, what do you mean I don't pay? I said, I'm paying $50. He goes, well, we expect that we're going to get what we get for, a game.
Wow.
And I was kind of like, all right, there I go.
When my boys were playing, you would call and you'd say, hey, we're playing up here. You might as well come up and work the scrimmage so you can watch them while you're doing the scrimmage. I mean, but you didn't think anything of it back then. I mean, it was just part of the deal. And I mean, you don't do it. You can tell the guys that do it for money and the guys that do it because they love the game. When you watch them officiate, who's just there because they want that paycheck.
Yeah, you can tell.
I mean, you as a coach especially can tell, And
well, kind of the last thing, I was recently, since I'm retired, I got more time, but I came across the thing. The segment was entitled "Tell Me a Story," and it was they had Nick Saban on. He was telling a story about what he called his first coaching experience. And he said he was a 15-year-old quarterback at high school, and they were playing like their rival. He said they were like 8-1, and they had to win this game to get into the state playoffs. So he said they were down like 18-0, came back, got it 18-12. He goes, we're making a drive, and he said that they call timeout. So he said at 15-year-olds, he was a quarterback. He goes, I was calling all the plays. So he said, I go to the sideline, I go to the coach, like, what are we going to call? And he goes, because I didn't really want to make the call, because he said, if it doesn't work, he said, that's going to go on me. And he said, the coach looked at him and goes, well, you got the fastest tailback in the state. You got a 3-time All-State wideout. He goes, I don't give a damn what you call. He said, but the ball probably needs to go to one of those two guys. So he said, I faked the handoff through a slant route. He said, we scored a touchdown and win the game. He said, he goes, the lesson I learned was, he goes, when it gets to crucial times, he says, don't worry about the play, but you better get it to the players. We talked a little bit beforehand. I'm sure as an official, you have some stories that you could tell, and maybe let's end with a few good stories that you have.
Like I told you before, the one that always sticks out just because it was my boys, they were probably 5 and 7. We had Winford at Ontario, and there was condensation because it was late. You know, it was probably February sometime, and in fact, it was probably last game of the year. I don't know. You might remember,
Oh, yeah.
Joe. It usually
Well,
was.
I'll give you the insight on this. So when we got in the NCC, you know, you had the league schedule. So typically in most leagues, like every 2 years, that league schedule rotates. But for some reason, Rob never rotated it because it was like we kind of knew that Winford, Ontario was going to be the best game of the year. So, you know, the first round ended like the second week of January. Then the last game was always like almost the last week of the season.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
Well, it was the floor was slippery, so we stopped, and I remember asking you, you know, do we have some kids? And he goes, boy, I don't really have anything. So we had my boys come out. They were probably 5 and 7, one at each end with a towel, and they would run out and wipe up the floor. And like I said, I didn't know much about style, so Trevor had on like blue sweatpants with a green and red top, and he reminds me to this day that, hey, I can't believe you embarrassed me right there, because it was a TV game and he was on TV running out there in those ugly sweats and stuff. So yeah, that was.
Is there like though a game, like a big game that you remember in your career officiating, or games like that would kind of sticks out in your mind?
Like I said before, for like 5 or 6 years, Mark Heyman would call, and I would have the Ontario Winford game at the end of the year. And that, I mean, it was always a packed house. It was always fun. You know, it was a great time. And I know also the first technical I gave, I don't know how many years it was in, but some kid bounced the ball and it went clear to the ceiling. And my partner told me that I bruised my chest reaching for my whistle because I couldn't find it, and I kept poking myself in the chest because I had never given one. You know, I didn't know what I was doing. And another story I had, I think it was my 7th year. I was at Jar Arena, and we had Orville in the regionals, and had a foul, turned around, went to the table. I was on the wrong side. I should have been back on the other side. The table was at the other side. The news media was on one side, and I was looking at the news media. That was embarrassing. That was really embarrassing.
Was that when Smitty was at Orville?
Yes, Smitty was at Orville.
And he probably didn't remind you either.
You know, so, but it, you know, it was fun. And I would, you know, I've told you before, I mean, this doesn't have anything to do with stories, but, you know, I always judged coaches on whether I wanted my kids to play for them, and you were one I would have picked up for my boys to play for. And I mean, it just, you know, I know you wore me out just like everybody else, but you know, I appreciated the way you coached kids hard and they played hard, and you know, that's what you don't see anymore. Sometimes, you know, kids don't play very hard, and I know your kids always played hard and were respectful.
One of the things, I mean, you know, I'm not gonna lie. I mean, I got upset with officiating at times, and you know, but the thing I always tried to do was, you know, when a game was over, I mean, much like, you know, when you mentioned Winford, when Rob and I for 32 minutes, you know, we hated each other, but off the floor we were pretty good friends. And I always tried to remember with officiating was, you know, officials can have good nights and bad nights too, and sometimes if they had a bad night, you can't continue to hold that over. You know, sometimes I think coaches. That sometimes you get into that rut of you see somebody on that crew that you're like, you know, but
and you don't know if somebody's dog died that day or what happened, and it's tough to remember that, you know, until after the game you think, oh man, maybe he had a rough day.
I think we had an official one night that was really, really bad, and then I think our AD came to me after the game, go, hey man, just to let you know, he came in, said his wife just walked out on him before he came to the game. And so we were like, well, that might be like why he didn't want to talk to us tonight. So,
yeah, tough. I was with Charlie Jones one night, a little story, and I don't know if I should tell the whole thing, but anyway, it was during 2-man, and a guy from New Philly and I were at Triway when Montgomery was there.
Yep.
And this might get, I'm going to tell it the way it was. And so Charlie comes in and he says, hey, we're working 3-man tonight. We had no idea. And they were playing Doylestown. Jack Purtell was at Doylestown. And he said, hey, Monk said the way they got screwed at Doylestown last year, I'm supposed to take care of that. And so I mean, we were stunned. and there was very little three-man being worked at that time. You just
Yeah.
you settled in, you stayed at one spot, you didn't rotate or anything. And so we go out for the captain's meeting. He said, I'll be the R. And so he conducted the meeting. He said, boys, I got up at 4 this morning. He said, I've been on the go all day. I'm tired. I'm wore out. You open your mouth, you get one of these. And I mean, these kids were, whoa. I mean, he said it loud, and I didn't know what to do. I never heard a pregame to the kids like that. I thought, whoa, we are in a and so, but yeah, that was quite interesting when he was yelling at the kids and he said that. But
Yeah.
now, what would you? I guess to ask you a question, is there something you would like to see change about the game from the officiating side?
I mean, the concern I would have if I'm a coach right now is, I think you brought it up, is the lack of younger officials. I mean, if I go to a game, you see a lot of older officials, and the one complaint I've heard with older officials is they say the young guys, they don't want to kind of pay their dues. They just want to jump into it right away. And I guess that would be my concern from that. I mean, I think the big thing that I always appreciated with officials was, if I was acting like an idiot, then they shouldn't talk to me. But if you have a legitimate question, then I think that that they should have. And for the most part, as I've watched officials after being out of coaching, I think most officials do that. And I think the really good ones, like I mentioned, that younger official.
Yeah.
I think I just saw him maybe 2 weeks ago. I don't even know his name. But a coach was kind of getting upset, and he motioned to the official. He goes, "Hey," he goes, "Go." He goes, "I've got it," because I think he made the call.
Right.
And he went over and like, this is what I saw. And I think that's one of the things as an official, is if you can, coach still may not agree with you, but I think a coach appreciates you taking the time to go, "Hey, this is what I saw," and you might go, "Well, that's not what I saw."
And I think
but
that's a
you move
good
on.
thing about being on the coach's side after you call foul.
Yes.
You can communicate with
Yep.
them. I mean,
Yeah.
they moved us over because I think guys were
Yeah.
getting eaten up and weren't
Yeah.
And I think now, I hope some of them see that it's better to be talking than them yelling at you across the
Yes.
floor,
Yeah.
And
Well, because the conversation doesn't have to be a long conversation.
No.
And that's the other part, I think, with officials is, there's got to be a stopping point if a coach is going to continue to go. So.
Right. And I know, like Doug Ute has had meetings that I've been part of on how to retain officials and how to get younger guys in, and we've had meetings on that. So I mean, the OHSAA is trying because I think I don't know how many years it's been now. I don't know if it's pre-COVID or not, but at that time the average age of a basketball official was 55 years old. So, and I'm sure it's going up. It's not getting any younger, probably.
Well, the hard part I think you bring up too is if younger guys, many times some of the worst games they have to do as far as crowd is at a junior high game.
Yes.
And then
Yes,
and
exactly.
then the problem is if you're a young person, there's not usually somebody there that's like going to take control of the situation.
Right.
Or somebody after a game that can give them advice, like what you
Yeah.
said earlier when you were a young official, that maybe if you had a bad game, Russ is going to come in and say, "Hey, you might have wanted to do this."
Right.
So it makes a difference.
And I think too many officials are jealous of young officials, and there's no reason to be. There's plenty of games. If the young official takes your job at that school, you go down the street and get one at that school. There's plenty. So you need to help them, I think. And I've tried to do that, over the years, because you can always find games. It's not a problem with that.
So last question: how many tournament games you have this year?
I get to go. I got a boys regional, so don't know how many you count them up, but
Do you know where
yes, yeah.
you know what division it is and where it's at?
It's at the Canton Field House,
Okay.
and I'm not sure if it's Division III or Division IV, but
Okay.
I know it's up there, and that has some special meaning to me because that's where my boys got out 2 years in a row to get to Columbus. So I like to go in there. The atmosphere's good. That place is loud, and it's not a bad drive. You enjoy going there. It's not like going when they send you Ohio U. That's a hump.
Yeah, because that's not like a straight shot. Well, it's a little bit more straight now than it used to be.
Yes,
So.
correct.
So, well, Charlie, we appreciate you coming
All right.
on, and hopefully our viewers enjoyed it. As you've mentioned, I mean, if there's young guys out there that have an interest in staying with the sport, and maybe your job prevents you from like being a coach, officiating is a great
Yeah.
way to stay involved and to be a part of continue to develop the game of basketball in the state of Ohio.
Exactly.
So
Thank
thanks
you.
a lot.
I appreciate
Thanks,
it.
Charlie. You got a game tonight?
Yeah, we got a bad game.
Where you at?
We're